Hello everyone, my name is WEIXING, a PhD student from Missouri University of Science and Technology. Today I'm going to talk about the topic optimizing the activation efficiency of sub-3 nanometer particles in a laminar flow condensation particle counter by model simulation. This research is advised by Dr. Wang, and before I start, I would thank for Dr. Mark Stolzenburg, Dr. Michel Attoui, and Dr. Jiaoshi Zhang. Thanks for their effort. And I will go through background, objective, methods, results and discussion, and summary. Okay, let's see background. The measurement of particle formation with size below 3 nanometer particles is critical because it helps understanding of atmospheric nucleation, particle formation, and growth. Currently, a condensation particle counter, also called CPC, have been widely used to measure the concentration of aerosols. However, it's challenging for CPCs to measure particles below 2.5 nanometer due to the insufficient activation of these particles. This raises the question, how can we improve the CPC detection efficiency for smaller particles? The diagram of working theory has been shown in the picture, which mainly comprises of condenser and saturator in CPC. Based on CPC working theory, two major parts that can impact CPC detection efficiency. One is the operational factors like temperature and fluids. Another method is working fluids. And another question is how can we evaluate detection efficiency? Here we want to introduce Kelvin equation. It determines the smallest particle that can be activated. When particle size is above the threshold, the particle can be successfully activated. And when particle size is below the threshold, the particles cannot be activated. That I will discuss more in the following slides. Given so many types of parameters and factors can take, modeling studies are necessary to optimize the detection efficiency of CPCs. And until now, the most widely used model is called a Graetz solution. It was developed by Dr. Stolzenburg, who is one of our collaborators in this project. This model can solve CPC heat and mass transfer problem. However, it doesn't consider the capillary inlet geometry and axial diffusion in CPC. In order to get a more complex modeling techniques, we introduced COMSOL. COMSOL has been extensively used in simulating complex geometry and can provide a good approach to adjust the parameters and do complex modeling. However, so far, not any studies use this model technique to compare Graetz solution, so we would like to check accuracy first and to see if it agrees with a Graetz solution. So based on the discussion in the background in our work, we simulate a sub-3 nanoparticle activation and growth in CPC by using COMSOL, and we also compare Graetz solution and COMSOL model to check accuracy, and we want to investigate the effect of the inlet geometry and axial diffusion and CPC operation conditions on particle activation. And we are trying to optimize the performance of CPC for detecting sub-3 nanoparticles. In terms of methodology, first of all, we set up COMSOL. A two-dimensional axisymmetric model has been developed in COMSOL software. The CPC follows the geometry of Stolzenburg's model, which is composed of a laminar flow tube that can separate it into a saturator, its extension, and a condenser. Shown in this picture. And the initial and boundary conditions are also set up. The default simulation conditions are listed here. And after running simulation, we can obtain the temperature profiles and the saturation ratio profiles within the simulated geometry. And we can further calculate the particle activation and growth based on this saturation ratio and temperature. Again, one need to note that the Kelvin equivalent size is a size that can be activated according to the equation, can be various at different locations of condenser due to the temperature and the saturation ratio value, and the distribution is shown in this figure. Secondly, we make a plan for simulation, and this table lists the simulation tasks. And we first compare COMSOL solution and the Graetz solution. We examine the geometry of capillary and different working fluids and the CPC working conditions to affect performance of CPC. And here we should note that in this study we use a method to find optimal saturator temperature corresponding to a total homogeneous nucleation rate of 1 particles per second. And this method can guarantee the highest possible to optimize activation efficiency. And again, a Kelvin equivalent size is important because it determines the particle size that can be measured. Results and discussion. Firstly, we made a comparison between COMSOL and Graetz. A comparison results for the profile of temperature, vapor pressure, saturation ratio at two different radio locations of CPCs shown. The two simulation methods showed excellent agreement between each other because of almost identical profile of temperature, vapor pressure, saturation ratio. The activation efficiencies as a function of particle size calculated by these two methods are also very similar. Our next task shows how the incorporation of the actual capillary geometry affects the profile of thermodynamic properties and the activation efficiency. Including capillary geometry, it caused some flow disturbance in the temperature and vapor pressure profile. However, the disturbance dissipates soon. Overall, including the capillary geometry would have a very limited effect on the result in the condenser. Our next task studied the influence of working fluid. Working fluids play a significant role in CPC performance in measured sub-3 nanoparticles. We identified the 5 best fluids out of 46 fluids that can achieve the lowest dp50, distinguished with the different colors in this figure. Glycerin shows a distinctly smaller dp50 value and in this black color curve compared to the other 4 working fluids. Other than that, in this work, we also examined the particle activation on the thermodynamic properties of working fluid, and will focus on saturation vapor pressure and surface tension. And the results show that the good particle activation associated with the lower saturation vapor pressure and a higher surface tension. This is mainly due to the surprising the rate of homogeneous nucleation. Next, other than calculating dp50 value as an indicator for particle activation, we also need to examine whether the activated particles can grow to a detectable size and be counted. Therefore, we listed our 5 best working fluids and to check and calculated the growth of the droplets along their trajectory in the condenser. The results show that except for glycerin, all the other 4 working fluids can grow particles size above 1 micrometer, which can be detectable. At last, we also use COMSOL to examine how the CPC operation conditions and geometry can affect the particle activation. We compare 5 different parameters and a condenser temperature, flow rate through condenser, and flow rate through capillary is associated with CPC operation conditions. The dependence of the activation efficiency is displayed in this figure, and conditions that can lead to a lower dp50 can be a good way to improve the performance of CPC. And the results show that a lower condenser temperature can have a better detection performance, but the flow rate through the condenser have a limited effect, and the flow rate through the capillary can affect a dp50 but not affect a dp0. And again, under the same condition, we also studied the diameter of condenser and the length of the condenser, which is associated with the geometry, and the results showed a smaller condenser diameter can have a better performance, but the length of the condenser have a limited effect. To summarize this work, we simulated the sub-3 nanoparticle activation and growth in a laminar flow CPC by using COMSOL, and COMSOL result agrees well with a Graetz solution used by Dr. Stolzenburg. We also examined some like a geometry effect and a working fluid and some operation factors that can improve the detection efficiency. And that's all for today's presentation, and thank you so much for your attention. And we also want to thank U.S. National Science Foundation for partly support this project. And our research paper has been published in Journal of Aerosol Science. And thank you so much again, and welcome to your question.